What's up, guys? Neil Orfield here, and I'm going to show you how I will be setting up my fantasy cruncher for tonight's single game slate between the Bears and the Patriots for FanDuel. I'm going to start by changing my columns to look the way I want them to. I have a quick view saved so that what I want to see in the middle of the screen is in the middle of the screen. You can see I've got my projections, how much I'm getting of a player after I run a crunch, ownership projections, etc., right in the middle of the screen. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set a cap on all players in the MVP spot. On FanDuel, you could, on DraftKings, I would set this to 20%. Typically on FanDuel, you just want the highest scoring player in the MVP spot. I think for this slate, I'm probably still going to keep it at 20%. Sometimes I'll use a higher exposure cap on FanDuel just because there are players who are so likely to be the optimal MVP. I don't think that's necessarily the case on this slate. So I'm just going to leave it at 20% cap across all players in my 150 set. Most of the work I'm going to be doing here is in the advanced options in the general tab and then the groups tab. Starting in the general tab, unique players per lineup. I'm making 150 lineups, so I don't mind having multiple lineups that are just one player apart from each other. So I'm going to leave this at one unique player. If you're making 20 or fewer lineups, I would probably change this to 2 unique players per lineup just to diversify those 20 lineups a little bit. Team salary, I don't set a minimum for Showdown. I do set a maximum, and this is something I do only for Showdown slates or slates where I have concerns about my lineup being duplicated. I want to make lineups that are not going to be duplicated 1,000 times because if I win, I want to win a lot of money. And on these types of slates, if you're duplicated 100 times, even in the best case scenario where your lineup is lucky enough to win the slate, you're still not making a ton of money. So I'm going to set a max salary cap here. I'm not going to allow lineups to have the full $60,000 salary and just to avoid duplication. So I'll set a max salary here of $58,500, leaving at least $1,500 on the table in every lineup that I make here. Offensive players versus defense, the default is max 2 players. I'm going to change this to 4. If I have 4 players from one team against just the defense of the other team, I'm totally okay with that, particularly in an ugly game like this, a potentially ugly game like this. That's totally fine with me, and it's something that a lot of people will avoid doing, so it's a way to get a little bit unique. Global exposure cap, I'm going to leave this at 100%. As you saw, I did set a cap in just the MVP spot of 20%, but for all other players, I'm going to leave the max I can get to at 100%. Randomness, I do use randomness. This is all about how much control you want over your lineups. If you want more control over your lineups, use lower or 0 randomness. I don't mind giving up some control over my lineup, so I set this to 50%. I'm also using normal distribution randomness, so I could set it a little bit higher. If you're using classic randomness, if you don't have Fantasy Cruncher Pro, you could set this a little bit lower, maybe 30 or 40%. Minimum projection included in calculation currently set to 3. That means that any player projected below 3 fantasy points cannot make it into my lineups. They're not part of my player pool. So if I want to include those players, I either need to adjust their projections up above 3 fantasy points, or I need to lower this below 3 fantasy points. I think I'm just going to leave this at 3. And if there are players I want in my player pool who project worse than 3 fantasy points, I will adjust those manually. Players from each team max 4. I'm going to leave it there. That means I can get 4 players from one team against 1 player from the other team. I'm totally fine with that if that happens. All right, now in groups. My groups generally revolve around the quarterbacks. It's the one position where you're usually, other than rushing quarterbacks, you're very reliant on other players to help you score fantasy points. And the quarterback also is the most expensive generally one of the most expensive players from their team. And they, on every play that the quarterback is involved in, whoever they're throwing the ball to scores more fantasy points in them on every pass play, I should say, because they can have rushing plays where the quarterback is the player who scores fantasy points. Occasionally, you'll see a quarterback catch a ball on a trick play, but for the most part, when a quarterback is involved in a play, throwing the ball, they're getting outscored by their teammate. So you need to be a little bit more concerned about correlation with your quarterbacks. Guys, NBA is here, and we've got our best promo of the year for you. For just $10, you can get 10 days of Stokastic plus Platinum. That means you'll get full access to all of our data and tools for every sport: NBA, NFL, NHL, PGA, you name it, everything we've got. You'll also get our new lineup generator, which allows you to enter some very basic settings to build and export up to 20 lineups using our data. The builder comes preloaded with settings used by top pros like Alex Baker and Steve Buzzard to help you build great lineups. Again, this deal gives you Stokastic Platinum for 80% off the normal price and gets you access to Lineup Generator. Use promo code Hardwood or click the link in the description to sign up. Now I'll show you exactly what I mean. Starting with a Mac Jones MVP group, I'm going to set Mac Jones in the MVP spot as my key player. I'll rename this group Mac Jones MVP. Now I'm just going to go through and add all of Mac Jones's pass catchers to a secondary group. Including the running backs here. All right, looks good. Now for Mac Jones, he is not much of a rusher. Most of the fantasy points that he scores is going to be by throwing the ball. So in general, if I have Mac Jones in the MVP spot, I would prefer to have multiple Patriots pass catchers elsewhere in the lineup, but I'm not going to require it in my 150 set. So I'm going to leave this at if Mac Jones is in the MVP spot, he's my key player. If any key player I use, so that's Mac Jones in the MVP spot. Use at least one player from this group. I'm not requiring multiple pass catchers in groups that have Mac Jones in the MVP spot, but I am also going to give boosts to all of these pass catchers, which is going to make it more likely that I have multiple Patriots pass catchers in the lineup with Mac Jones at MVP. Maybe slightly smaller boosts for the running backs. All right, that looks good. So now this just means in every lineup that I have Mac Jones in the MVP, I'm going to have at least one of these pass catchers in there, and I gave boost to make it more likely that I have multiple. If you're making 20 or fewer lineups, I might forego the boost and just say use at least two down here instead of one. But because I'm doing 150, I don't mind having some lineups that have maybe Mac Jones with just one Patriots pass catcher. All right, second group, Fields in the MVP spot. Fields is a lot different than Mac Jones in that he has shown that rushing upside. He could be the highest scorer on this slate without his pass catchers, any individual pass catcher actually putting up a ton of fantasy points. So I'm going to show you how I do that. I have Fields in the MVP spot as my key player. Going to add these Bears pass catchers to a secondary group. And I am being indiscriminate here, just adding every Bears pass catcher that I see without worrying about their projection or anything for the time being. All right, so we've got Fields in the MVP spot. Do I want to require a pass catcher here? I think the answer is no, because I'm doing 150 lineups. I don't mind having a few lineups in there that have Justin Fields in the MVP spot without any Bears pass catchers somewhere in the lineup. That's just because he does have that rushing upside. You know, he could have 50 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown to go along with maybe one passing touchdown to Darnell Mooney, but Mooney doesn't still put up enough fantasy points to be in the optimal lineup. I think there are ways for that to happen, but I would like to have at least one Bears pass catcher somewhere in the lineup with Fields in the MVP spot. If I were, again, making 20 or fewer lineups, I would probably leave it just like this, say include at least one of these players when I have Fields at the MVP, and then also have boosts. Because I'm making 150, again, I'm going to allow for a few lineups to have Justin Fields in the MVP spot without any Bears pass catchers. So I'm going to click this only apply plus minus adjustments because I'm doing 150 lineups. So I'm not requiring any of these players, any of these pass catchers to be in the lineup with Fields at MVP. I am just going to give boost to all of them to make it more likely that I get to one or more Bears pass catcher in a lineup that has Fields at MVP. Not sure exactly what I'm going to do with these running backs. I could even exclude them from this group entirely. I think Herbert has enough pass catching upside that maybe I want to include him, but he's been not extremely involved recently. So I don't know how I'll approach this exactly. But for now, I'm just going to give a little boost to these running backs, but bigger boost to the more primary pass catchers. All right, that's all I'm going to do there. I'm not even going to make a Fields flex group because I think I'm totally fine with having Fields as my only in the flex spot without having any Bears pass catcher elsewhere in the lineup. If I get too much of that, I would probably come back and make a group. But for now, I'm going to just allow that to happen, see how much I get. But I am going to make a Mac Jones flex group. And I'm going to say Mac Jones in the quarterback spot as my key player. That's in the flex spot as my key player. Once again, add all of these Patriots pass catchers to the secondary group. I'll include the running backs. And because I have Mac Jones in the flex spot here, I can also add his pass catchers in the MVP spot. All right. So now in this group, probably just going to leave it how it is and say if I have Mac Jones in the flex spot, have at least one pass catcher somewhere else in the lineup. You could do this, say only apply plus minus adjustments. It is half PPR. He does have one rushing touchdown in his career, so he does have the ability to at least score some fantasy points on the ground. He just doesn't have that much rushing upside. I would consider clicking this and then giving boosts in my 150 set if you're making 20 or fewer lineups. Again, I would have said it just like this. I think I'll think about whether I want to come back and do this, but I think that Mac Jones has little enough rushing upside that I probably want at least one Patriots pass catcher in any lineup that has Mac Jones in the lineup. Guys, NBA is here and we've got our best promo of the year for you. For just $10, you can get 10 days of Stokastic plus Platinum. That means you'll get full access to all of our data and tools for every sport: NBA, NFL, NHL, PGA, you name it, everything we've got. You'll also get our new lineup generator, which allows you to enter some very basic settings to build and export up to 20 lineups using our data. The builder comes preloaded with settings used by top pros like Alex Baker and Steve Buzzard to help you build great lineups. Again, this deal gives you Stokastic Platinum for 80% off the normal price and gets you access to Lineup Generator. Use promo code Hardwood or click the link in the description to sign up. All right, so I'm going to save. And now I'm just going to see what these lineups look like. Change this to use my projections, 150 lineups. All right, getting to a lot of the quarterbacks and Ramondre in the MVP spot. That makes sense. They're just the highest projected plays on the slate. Those are the guys you want in the MVP spot. Also getting to a good amount of the quarterbacks in flex spots. Typically, that's what I want. Quarterbacks are usually the higher scoring plays on the slate. Just looking through position by position to see how much am I getting of each player, each relevant player, and do I want to get more of them? I think I want more than one share of David Montgomery. Maybe I'll give him a thumbs up. Maybe Damian Harris as well. Not sure about Khalil Herbert at 16% at 10,000. Maybe I'd be fine with 9%. If I want to get any of Treston Ebner or Blossom Game, I'd have to change their projection to at least 3 fantasy points. I don't think they're not going to be a big part of my game plan tonight. As far from what I know right now, maybe I'll see something that changes that, but I don't think that either of these guys is going to be a big part of my game plan. Maybe I'll just change it to 3 and see if they get in there, but not sure if they will. A lot of Jacoby Myers, not getting to a ton of Darnell Mooney. Maybe I'd give him a thumbs up. He had 12 targets the last game. Tyquan Thornton, only 3.3%, maybe a thumbs up. Devontae Parker, 24%, looks good. Maybe I want some more Nelson Aguilar. He's only 4% owned. He clearly has upside if he plays. Not sure if he's going to be active tonight, but maybe I'll give him some thumbs up to see if he maybe makes it into some lineups. Equinemius St. Brown, pretty involved on only 7% ownership. Maybe I want more than this 12%. Dante Pettis, getting 25% currently. I'm cool with that. Velus Jones currently could not make it into my lineups. He has a projection below 3 fantasy points. I think I'd like to get to some Velus Jones. I'm not sure exactly how much yet. I'll make that decision later, but he's only getting 0.3% projected ownership. We've seen him in both of the past 2 games. They've designed plays for Velus Jones in the red zone to try to get him to score. So, he's got that upside. He's only 6,000. He's not getting any ownership. He's going to be a part of my lineup set for sure tonight on FanDuel. I'm going to get well above that 0% that the field is getting to. All right, I think those are all of the relevant players from wide receiver. And I'll show you. The reason I set Velus Jones to 3.8% here is I didn't want to get to as much Velus Jones as Dante Pettis. They have the same salary. So I'm looking at, they have the same salary. If I gave him the same projection as Dante Pettis, there's a good chance that I'm going to get to, approximately the same amount of them. I'm not sure I want as much Velus Jones as I do Dante Pettis. He doesn't project as well as Dante Pettis. He's not as involved for the Bears. So I want to get above the field. I don't necessarily want to get to the same amount. If I'm getting to 25% Dante Pettis, of course, this is probably going to come down because I've given boost to other players and not Pettis. But I'll be doing this incrementally, crunching several times before I actually get to the lineups that I like. Maybe I will end up with more of Velus Jones. But for now, that's the approach I'm taking. Okay, Hunter Henry getting 26%, getting 11%. Cole Kmet not getting to any Jonnu Smith. That's because his projection is below 3 fantasy points. If I want to include him in my player set, I have to change that to at least 3. Same thing with Ryan Griffin, Trevon Wesco. Maybe I'll want some Ryan Griffin. I don't know if I'm going to really want these guys in my lineups. Probably more likely I'll want some Jonnu. Maybe I'll give him a thumbs up as well. Kicker getting to 28%. Nick Folk looks pretty good. Kickers could do pretty well on a slate like this where it's expected to be a pretty low scoring game. I guess the total is above 40, so not the lowest scoring, but fairly low here. Gave a thumbs up to Cairo Santos. Maybe I want more than 11%. And then the defenses, of course, look pretty good. I think that I might want to get more of the Bears defense here. They're cheaper, and they have half the ownership of the Patriots defense. I naturally only get 8%. I think I'd like to get more of the Bears defense. Mac Jones has thrown 5 interceptions in 3 games played so far this year, threw 13 interceptions last year. So there's certainly a path for the Bears to, have a pick 6, force some fumbles. They have paths to score some fantasy points and not projected for a ton of ownership. So I'll probably want to get more than the field of the Bears defense. And I'm going to crunch 150 lineups now and see what comes out. As you can see, these 2 thumbs up I gave to the Bears defense, I'm getting to more of them now. Now I'm not getting to a ton of Cairo Santos. I just gave 1 thumbs up, maybe I want another. I'm not going to go through my whole process here, but I'm just kind of showing you the approach I generally take. I'm looking at each position by position. How much do I want for these different players? What am I getting to currently? Currently not getting to any. I'm only getting to 1 Jonnu Smith lineup. I think I'd rather have Jonnu Smith than Ryan Griffin or Trevon Wesco. I think he's got higher likelihood of success. I'll give him 1 final thumbs up. Probably want more than 5% Cole Kmet. Give him a couple thumbs up. Anyway, this is something I'm going to crunch several times before I end up with the lineups that I like. As you can see here, my concern with Velus Jones is I was going to get to 25%. But because I gave thumbs up to all these other players in different spots, even Dante Pettis' projection came down relative to all of those players. So I could set a little bit of a higher projection for both of these guys if I want more of them. Maybe I want to set this to 4.4 and 4.2, something like that. I think that I'd rather get to more of Dante Pettis than Velus Jones. I think that he's certainly got the easier path to a big score. But this is just the general thought process that I go through. I'm looking at all players relative to each other. Now, of course, I've given these guys big enough boosts that they are projected for better than Equinemius St. Brown and Nelson Aguilar if you don't factor in the thumbs up. So now I need to think about, do I want to give these guys bigger boosts? I'm not going to go through the whole process right now. This is just my general thought process. You have to look at every player individually. Do I like the exposure that I'm getting to that player? Where can I cut back? Where do I want to get more to get to the exposures that I like on every player? And then also looking through the lineups themselves. Here we've got right away Justin Fields in the MVP spot with no Bears pass catchers. I'm okay with that again for a few lineups in 150 set. I don't want to see a ton of it though. So if I do see too much of this, I'll go back and I'll change my group that has Justin Fields in the MVP spot and give bigger boosts to my Bears receivers, or just uncheck the box that says only apply plus minus adjustments and just say, I'm just going to require a Bears pass catcher in every Justin Fields MVP lineup. Here you can see right away we've got Mac Jones in the MVP spot with multiple pass catchers. We also have Mac Jones going up against the Bears defense. We've got 4 Patriots against 1 Bears defense. Remember, I set that to max 4 players against my defense. Here it comes to fruition. I don't mind seeing that in some lineups. Fields with ESB, Fields with multiple pass catchers. Yeah, so this is my general process, just looking through my lineups. What do I need to adjust? Here's Fields in the flex with no Bears pass catchers. I'm okay with that in some lineups. Probably not. Don't want to see it in half my lineups, but if I see it in a handful, I'm okay with it. Anyway, this is my general process. I will keep crunching until I get to exposure levels that I like and until my lineups correlate the way I want them to. And I'll be adjusting, with the thumbs up. And then also I can go back and, as I was saying, go back to my group and say, you know what, if I have Fields in the MVP spot, I don't want to have too many lineups that I don't have any Bears pass catchers. Maybe I need to give bigger boosts to these other to these Bears pass catchers. This is the kind of general approach that I'm taking here. And I'm just doing bit by bit, making incremental changes until I get to lineups that look the way I want them to. I'll crunch one more here. I'm not going to really go through the process here, but you can see here, even after I gave that little boost there, I'm still getting lineups that have Fields in the MVP spot with no Bears pass catchers elsewhere in the lineup. I think I'm okay with that. But I don't want to see it a ton. Here's one with Fields in the flex. Still happening. Maybe I need to give bigger boosts in those groups. But that's something that I will go, I'll crunch several times before I get to the lineup sets that look the way I want them to. And that's something that I'll have to do later on tonight. It's usually something I do after inactives come out, because it's sometimes these decisions can be easier to make once we know who is playing and who is not. Anyway, hope you can find some success tonight using this or a similar process.